There are helicopters outside, protesters walking about a block away from my house. It's June 2nd, 2020. This is a lot of turmoil in the world, from the COVID-19 virus to now all this protesting going on, rightfully so, for police abuse and the killing of George Floyd. I think people misunderstand one thing about this is that it's about George Floyd, but it was just one of those things where enough is enough. There's a bigger picture involved here, which has been going on for generations, right? I'm old enough to live through the 1992 LA riots, which was the result of the cops who almost killed Rodney King got acquitted in Simi Valley. And LA just went into a storm. I think the biggest difference from the 92 LA riots to everything that's going on now is that back then it was just a lot of anger, and a lot of anger taken out on the city, a lot of anger taken out on innocent white people, just built up, pent up anger that just people exploded with. Footage of this man almost getting beaten to death, and the cops get off. So this one's different because there's a video as well, and the man dies. But finally, all the communities are uniting and just had enough. So the protests are so necessary to make a difference. The rioting and looting, definitely not. But the rioting and looting has nothing to do with protests. And protesters are not out there looting and rioting. During the LA riots, it was scary. I'll tell you what happened with in my situation. I was in the valley when the riots broke out. My little brother was 6 or 7 at the time. He was going to preschool on Sunset Boulevard. I was in the valley. Riots break out. This is before cell phones, so I needed to head straight to his preschool. There was no communication between my parents and myself. There's no cell phones, so I'm jumping in the car to go, and literally people were getting dragged out of the cars and beaten to death. So my friend hands me a sword. He says, "Just dude, keep that on your front seat and just be careful." So I jumped in my car, took off to my brother's preschool. Might have been elementary school. I think it was preschool. To pick him up and take him home. And as I was driving, you're freaked out because now you're on edge because you don't know who's next to you when you stop at a red light. What do you do? Basically, in California, we have this thing called the California stop. So when you come to a stop sign or a red light, you don't come to a complete stop. You edge yourself towards it, so your foot is always ready to hit the gas. So basically, it's never a complete stop. It's you're kind of cruising to the stop sign, to the red light, because you just never know. Because at the time, also, there was a lot of carjackings going on. So you just kind of learned, always keep your eye on all the mirrors, the rear view mirrors, the side mirrors, everything like that. So I was on edge. I had the sword ready. If somebody ran up to me, that sword's going through them. I don't give a shit. That was different. This from what's going on now. Now it's a community uniting. So it's not like people versus people. It's people versus the politicians versus the government versus the people in charge. And I don't think even it has anything to do with the cops. It has everything to do with the system. How the system has been just getting away with literally murder for years. So this one's different, except at nights. And at night, a whole different crowd comes out, as you could tell. We've all seen videos of bricks being set up for what? For destroying property, for possibly hurting people. Now, who's setting up those bricks? It makes you wonder. I wish people would stop and be like, hey, why are these bricks here? And you get people who are recording it and recording people setting them up. So at some point, I truly hope that once this is over with and done, there is going to be a massive search to find out who did this and which groups did it, and whichever groups did it, whoever was helping sponsor them goes to prison. Goes to fucking prison. Or better yet, I would just put them against the wall and just throw some bricks at them. What's happening now, you're getting victims creating more victims. It's horrible. And this is basically our politicians playing people against people. Both sides. Democrats and Republicans. Because if you think about it, LA riots were in 92. Which presidents did we go through? We went through Bush. We went through Clinton's. We went through Barack Obama. We went through Donald Trump. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And in 2020, we still have the same problems. Systematic, as doesn't matter who's in charge. Unfortunately, our leader right now is not really taking control of the situation and being a human being about this. He's being a bully once again. So people are frustrated. I mean, all you see on Facebook, people arguing. And what are they arguing? Everybody's a human being and everybody wants the right thing to be done for most part. And they're arguing with each other because, again, everybody's divided. Everybody has their opinion on Colin Kaepernick. I got my opinion on Colin Kaepernick. I have my reservations about Colin Kaepernick. His message was right on. I don't know if he was necessarily legit about his message, but he had the right message. So now people are just like, hey, look, he took a knee for this. He took a knee for this, but I just can't get into the rest of it, unfortunately. But yeah, 4 years ago, there should have been something that was like, hey, look, this is happening. A lot of the football players are doing it. Why are they doing it? What is the reasoning? And now we have 2020 with this virus, and still people just can't be human beings to each other. Speaking about the COVID-19, I went and got tested yesterday. I set up an appointment last week. I've had a sore throat for a handful of days. Could be just a sore throat. I don't know. But I'm healing at my parents' place. They're elderly. I'm still dealing with my healing on my leg. And I'm a diabetic. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. So last week I set up an appointment for this morning. I was hoping it was still going to be open, and it was. What I was told in the video I watched to study how to get tested was going to be the saliva test, the cotton swab in your mouth. No. When I got in, when I pulled up, it was a drive-through one, and it's through your nasal cavity. And let me tell you what, that was one of the worst pains I've ever had. You know, I dealt with these surgeries on my leg in the hospital for 2 months. Needles everywhere, right? This pain was pretty brutal. I recorded with my GoPro. I need to watch the footage because I was kicking and I wasn't screaming, but I was kicking. I wanted to scream. And the lady was just like, okay, a little bit longer, and they give you a countdown just so you kind of grin and bear it, or bite your tongue and bear it. But tomorrow I get my results. Hopefully I'm negative. If I'm not, I'll just be at home for a couple of weeks and see what happens. It would be ironic that I survived almost losing my leg, almost dying, kidney failure, everything else, and I die of this COVID-19, which the only reason I laugh is because it would be ironic, right? Anyways, the reason I wanted to do this podcast is because today the protests are right outside my house. I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail tonight, but I doubt it. It's LA. LA lives on emotion. There's been a lot of rioting at nights, in LA especially. In the last few nights throughout the community, there's been destruction. Tonight it's on Hollywood Boulevard. I really hope that Hollywood Boulevard doesn't get destroyed. There's a lot of history there. Same goes with Sunset Boulevard. But the protesters can't really stop the criminals. I mean, we don't need protesters who are doing an amazing job, sending their message to the police, to the politicians. They don't need to be getting physically involved with criminals that are running around stealing. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail tonight. I doubt it, but we'll see. So I wanted to do this podcast. One, I wanted to post my thoughts on a lot of this stuff and share my perspective in my journey as a Russian Jew coming to the United States, and share what my parents went through and what I saw, and how immigrants who come to this country, what the struggles they go through, and why did they come to this country. And it's a shame that immigrants fight so hard to come to this country. Some die trying to get to this country, and this is still going on in this country. United States of America is the best country in the world. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Because that's why people come here. But the problem is, land of opportunity should be land of opportunity for everybody, not for select few. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not. And this is where all this anger comes from. And I'm glad there are probably more white people protesting than black people. Because, well, first of all, there's more white people. But it's amazing to see that it's finally hit the white community some years later, 28 years later, after LA riots. This is happening. And LA, just like the rest of the country, has systematic racism, for sure. I remember, and it was a little bit funny, but not really. I mean, I guess Daryl Gates, if people who live in LA, they will remember who Daryl Gates is. He was the police chief of LA, and he was a racist asshole, allegedly. Well, there were posters put up of him with like the Hitler mustache all over the place, because that's when the LAPD was brutal to people. Corrupt, brutal. And after the LA riots, we had the whole O.J. Simpson thing. And when O.J. was acquitted, Daryl Gates did a press conference. And he really did this. You could go on YouTube it. And he gets on the mic, on camera, and says, "White people, please don't go out there and riot." That's exactly what he said. That's literally throwing and spitting in black people's faces. Are you kidding me? There's a big difference between O.J. killing a couple of people and what the cops did. Cops who are paid to protect and serve, what they did to Rodney King. Yes, Rodney King was a criminal. He was. But when you're a cop and you pull someone over, you're not judge, jury, and executioner of that person. Your job is to put that person in custody and let the judicial system take care of it, hopefully properly. Rodney King, after this whole incident, wound up having more legal issues that had nothing to do with this, but that doesn't matter. So when Daryl Gates did that, it kind of opened up the eyes to a bunch of people. Like, look at this guy. This is the police chief, and this is how he talks. Are you seriously kidding me? So I wanted to share the few things that I've went through as a Russian Jew, just to give you an idea that a lot of people go through a lot of shit, and see a lot. And when I go online and I post certain things, a lot of it comes from what I've seen and what I've experienced as a young kid, watching my parents struggle to come to this country, and what they went through coming to this country to better their life for themselves, for me. Eventually, my brother was born. Glad he was born here. My parents helped bring the rest of the family over from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So when I was 6 years old, I think 5 or 6 years old, my parents applied to leave the Soviet Union to come to the United States. So you have to go on the waiting list. Now, what happens when you go on the waiting list? You have to go in. I guess it's kind of like getting your visa. So you have to go in for an interview. I don't know, once a month, every other month or so, and they interview you. They talk to you. They'll let you know if you're allowed to leave the country or not. So what happens is my dad would go in, talk to them. They would give him the news, good or bad. A few times he took me with him, and what I saw these KGB agents do to my dad and the things they said to my dad, and for my dad to keep his cool, it takes more strength to keep you cool under those conditions and what they're saying than anything else. And my dad's a hothead, complete hothead, typical Russian hothead, but called a traitor and equivalent of the N-word. Like there's a word in Russian called zhed, which means basically kike, equivalent of an N-word to a black person. And my dad was constantly called that. I was called that. I was going to school. Now it's Ukraine. Back then it was just Soviet Union. So I'm Russian. I'm not Ukrainian. Ukrainian people are very anti-Semitic. If you're Ukrainian, listen to this, and you're not, God bless you. But I know way too many Ukrainians. I've dealt with way too many Ukrainians to know better. Anyways, And you know, and this is like for Jewish people, especially Russian Jews who have a problem with Ukrainians or older that have a problem with Germany or Germans, they should completely understand what people of color go through in this country. Completely, whether you're Latin, Black, Asian, these people go through a lot. Because if you think about it, if you're Jewish and you're white, you could blend in. So those racists towards your religion can't really point you out and target you. If you have a different color, you don't have those options. You can't blend in. So you're constantly standing out and you're just basically like a walking target. You know, you're walking around and there's that fucking sniper, racist fucking sniper. Just do. There's another one. There's another one. So people that come here should understand what black people go through. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's hard to step back from their own problems and step into someone else's shoes. That's why to me it's so important to watch shows of different cultures, watch documentaries, talk to people from different cultures. That's why I love talking to old people of every race, because they have stories to tell you, good and bad. Their experiences are priceless. When I was in the hospital and they told me I might have to go to a rehab center, and my options were a rehab center or like going to like a retirement home to heal and rehab. And I asked them if I could go to a retirement home, and they're like, "What's wrong with you? Why would you want to go to a retirement home?" I'm like, old people have the best stories. Are you kidding me? The best stories. You could learn so much from older people, and they would love to share stories because what are they doing? They're sitting there just waiting to die. At least they can share their life with somebody. How wonderful is that? This is why, like, a lot of times when I befriend somebody and someone's like new in my life and they're really interested in what I have to say, I love it. I love to share stories. And it's not just stories from what I do for a living. My stories from Russia, from Italy, from growing up. Those stories are way more impactful than anything I do in fucking porn or in horror movies. Those things are jobs. You know, what molds you as a human being is what you do away from your job or away from your career. It's what you do as a human being and what experiences you face. You know, that's the thing is like, instead of judging and saying, like, look what they're doing, how about you go talk to somebody? I'm going to like veer off a little bit for just a quick story. When you talk to people of different color or religion or race, whatever it may be, they can teach you a lot about their experiences. And I worked with this guy on the show called The X Show years ago, close to 20 years ago now. He was I think he was a grip electric guy. I was a video utility guy. And one day we sat down and we were talking during lunch, and he had a hole in the back of his head. So I asked him about it, or he brought it up. I forget how the conversation started. But anyways, he was telling me he was playing football in Utah, college football, and he had a best friend for years. They're best friends, roommates. Then his best friend, who's a white guy, takes him fishing. He takes him fishing and then proceeds to shoot this guy in the back of the head because he was black. So he shoots this guy in the back of the head and leaves him for dead. Luckily, this brave man didn't die. He survived. He I don't know how he got back to town. He got back to town, survived. But you don't know who's who and what they're hiding inside themselves, inside their heart, inside their mind. And that's the scary part. And this is what's been going on in this country. And now, with everything that's happening, you see people's true colors in many ways because the tensions are so high from the virus to what's happening now. So you're getting, in a lot of ways, you're getting a lot of good out of people because you see what people are saying, people protesting. People should go and protest. I wish I could go and protest. I'm too fucking old. I just got tested for COVID. My leg is still damaged. I would be good for a block, and then somebody's going to have to, like, walk me back. I wish I could go out there, but 100% I support all the protests. Protest fucking for the rest of the year. It doesn't matter because something needs to change in this country. But the looting and the rioting, no. You know something? If I had a gun with rubber bullets and you're looting and rioting, yeah, I'll be aiming for your throat, because you feel victimized or you are victimized. You shouldn't create more victims. That's not how it works. Because you create more victims, you're continuing the cycle of this shitstorm. Okay, so back to sorry, I'm all over the place because like I got a lot of emotion, but I'm not gonna cry. I'm just going to tell my story. I mean, like I hear people back. I opened up my balcony so I could hear what's going on outside. I don't know if the mic's picking it up or not, but there's helicopters. There are people chanting. There are people screaming. It doesn't sound like any violence. It just sounds like protesting, which it should be. That's how it should be. So when we were in Russia, my dad would go in, I think almost 2 years worth of waiting to leave the country. At that point, I finished first grade, started second grade. I hated going to school in Russia, especially second grade. In second grade, I had to learn the Ukrainian language, and I hated it. I thought it was the ugliest language. Couldn't understand why there was a different language than Russian. I was getting beat up, not on the daily, but every so often I would get beat up and be called the word Zhid. I didn't know why. I had to ask my parents, what does that mean? I was a kid. I was, 7 years old? 8? And my parents, they're sugarcoated it. They wouldn't, tell me exactly what it meant, but I found out later. In Russia, the schools were 10 grades, 1st through 10th. You go through school, all 10 grades. And you're in school in first grade with 10th graders, 8th graders, 9th graders, 7th graders, whatever. And you go to lunch. They're all there. This is when you get picked on for being, a different religion or I'll be honest with you. It wasn't even a color thing because I had a black classmate. She was a classmate of mine. No one ever picked on her. They picked on the Jewish kids. It's interesting how the Ukrainians picked and choose who they were going to be prejudiced towards or against. So the day came where my dad comes home and says, we have been approved to leave the country. And I was so happy strictly because I got a chance to leave. I didn't have to go to class anymore. I asked my mom, do I have to go back to class? And they said no. And I was so happy that I didn't have to go back to class, get beat up, and learn Ukrainian. That was like the highlight for me. And going to the United States, because I used to, I was an artist back then, and I used to draw American planes, which said Sasha A, which meant like USA in Russian. And they were like bombing the Russian tanks. I wish I had those drawings still, man. Oh my goodness. But so we were preparing to leave. My grandfather gave me $300. My grandfather was a farmer, blacksmith and a farmer. So it was my dad and my mom's father. And we took all our stuff, and basically what you do is you take a train to, like, I think it was Poland or Czechoslovakia. You just kind of basically make your way through the countries until I think you get to Austria, and then you take a plane to Italy. So every night we were at a different train station. And think about this. So we're traveling with all our luggage, can't speak the language of each country, going to a country that none of us have been to across the planet, and just blindly, just to get away from the oppression we were dealing with and the scrutiny and being called all kinds of names and attacked in some ways. So I remember sleeping in the train station in Czechoslovakia, in Yugoslavia, in Poland, traveling on those trains where you have like your own rooms with bunk beds. I still have coins from back in the day. Still have all the coins from every country we traveled through. The thing is, before leaving Russia, you have to go through the border. And this is where it would get really tricky and hairy. Because the KGB agents, or a gang, I mean, they're just like a legitimate gang. They would rob people. They took the $300 that my grandfather gave me. I think they were actually rubles. I don't remember if they were converted to dollars or not. But they took the money my grandfather gave me. They would go through people's clothes. They would steal things. Some people would swallow like jewelry just to get out of the country. People would hide whatever they had, whatever their jewelry, like in their makeup kits, in clothes. A lot of people would just bribe the KGB agents to leave them alone. It was very, very scary. Just think about it. You're leaving the country. You're already a traitor in their eyes. So no laws, even with, if you're a citizen there, laws didn't apply. Cops and KGB agents could do whatever the fuck they wanted to do to you, especially when you're Jewish and you're leaving the country. You're the ultimate traitor. So it was scary, like my parents are beyond brave to do something like this. And this is where my work ethic comes from. And this is where my work ethic, to a point where I will kill myself to get the job done. And this is where my loyalty comes from. And my dedication to my job, to my friends, to my relationships, to whatever it may be, because I've seen my parents go through it. I learned from my parents firsthand. I mean, like, I am beyond mere reflection of what they are, because I learned by watching them. So we went to Italy. We went to Austria for a month and a half first. And, again, no language. You kind of have to learn as you go along. The interesting thing is, I'm like, 8.5 at the time. And we're staying in this building that's a big brick building. We stayed on the top floor. And the bottom floor was like all these pretty women, in like bikinis or lingerie or whatever. And there's like pictures of them everywhere outside the building. Years later, my parents told me we were living above a brothel, whorehouse. I don't know what it was. It was something like that. There were definitely ladies of the night in Austria, and so that was kind of like where we lived for a month and a half. The first time we went to a supermarket in Austria, I remember walking through those doors in shock of how big it was, how bright it was, how much food there was. I mean, you're coming from Russia where you're standing in line for bread, for meat, and you're hoping there's enough for you when you finally get to the front of the line. Now you're walking into the store with everything. I do remember the first thing I bought there, my parents bought for me. I bought a cowboy and Indian set, plastic cowboy and Indians. The Indians were obviously all red because they were just like molds, plastic molds. The cowboys were like tan color, so I guess white versus red, back then. Some were on horses, some were just, like standing there with a tomahawk or a gun, and even one had a carriage. They were all like really cheaply made, but for me it was amazing. Cowboys and Indians. I never had cowboys and Indians. So that talk about a culture shock where you're coming from nothing. And now you walk into the supermarket with everything. Eventually, after a month and a half, we went up going to Italy and staying in Italy for 3 months. As an 8.5-year-old, I experienced Rome and the beauty of Italy. But as an 8.5-year-old, you really don't appreciate it until later in life. You're like, man, I was there, but didn't appreciate it whatsoever. Just kind of like, hey, look at this broken building. Then eventually we got to the United States, and I watched my parents go through night school for like a year or two, to learn the language, and just work their way up to being successful tax-paying citizens of this country. And it's sad to see what's going on here now. It's like history just keeps repeating itself. My parents, they told me a story for a long time about a family friend. It's a really sad story. I get choked up telling the story because it's so vivid. Just a quick, I'm just going to go backward just a little bit, or maybe frontwards. Fast forward to, I was watching a show called The Hunters on Amazon Prime. And I wonder if you could hear these helicopters. They're like helicopters all over the place right now. Anyways, so Amazon Prime has a show called The Hunters, where these Jews are hunting old Nazi war criminals and taking the law into their own hands. And there's one scene in one of the episodes, the beginning scene, where it's the concentration camp, and there's like the Jews are just being walked in line to whatever they're doing, and then there's like a band of Jews, all prisoners playing, and then they all decide to play Hava and Nagila. And it's a really it's a really sad scene because there's like what 5 or 6 of them, one's playing violin, one's playing the flute, and so on, and the German soldier or whoever he is, the Nazi officer in charge starts yelling at them to stop playing, and they keep playing, and he's walking one by one and executing him, shooting him in the head, and every single one keeps playing, keeps crying, keeps playing, and he keeps walking to each individual one and killing them, and they never stopped till they all were killed. And it's a very impactful scene, especially for being Jewish. Being Jewish and hearing family stories of what happened, and then seeing something like this, it's very impactful. And this is why something like this, people need to understand how impactful it is for the black community. To see this going on and on and on and nothing being done about it, especially in 2020, where you think with today's technology and how things have changed and all the mainstream the stuff that's going on, we had a black president for 8 years, the power of the black community, and still to this day systematic racism continues, and the power that some cops have where they just don't they just don't think that law applies to them. And it sucks because there's way too many cops that are amazing human beings. They're all people. At the end of the day, they're still all people. And there's so many amazing cops, and they get bunched in with shitty cops that create this havoc. And now unfortunately, they're all standing there, shoulder to shoulder with batons and weapons to hold off protesters that they probably agree with. But what are they supposed to do? That's the sad part. And now, when you get protesters who go home and the rioters come out or looters come out, and you can't tell the difference, they're all dressed the same. So now you're getting cops going head-to-head with these rioters or looters, and then it becomes, the cops are attacking protesters, or this happened, or some cops are attacking protesters. Now all the cops are attacking protesters. It doesn't go that way. Not all protesters are looters, and not all cops are bad cops. But how do you distinguish one from the other? That's the part that's difficult. And then so you have this divide, this crazy divide. The story that I really want to go into about this Amazon Prime show, The Hunters, that really sparked my emotion. I watched it. I couldn't get through the rest of it, so I had to turn it off. It was so impactful because of the story I'm going to share with you. So my parents, ever since I was a little kid, they would tell me this one particular story because my parents, more than I have, obviously, dealt with anti-Semitism on a really big level in the Soviet Union, which is Ukraine now. And I'll be honest with you, not from Russian people, Ukrainians. I don't care if somebody gets offended. That's just how it is. Am I biased? Possibly. But if you're saying I'm biased, why can't black people be biased as well? Or at least, prejudgmental of white people. If I am of Ukrainian people, black people have the same reason, right? If not more. Because 400 years of it, right? To this day, to a week and a half ago. So the story that I was told by my parents was actually eventually told to me by the person who went through this. Years back, I'm not even sure how many years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, this man who's an old family friend came to visit us from Australia during Thanksgiving. And he shared the story with my family at the dinner table. And it still impacts me today. It impacted me when my parents told me, and then just hearing it from the actual person. It was a kick in the gut, So when he was 8 years old, World War II broke out. He was living in Ukraine. His dad was already serving in the military, so he was home with his sister, who was 11, and his mom. There was a knock on the door, his mom went to open the door, and it was their neighbor. The neighbor had a brick in his hand or a rock in his hand, and he hit his mom. His sister ran to defend the mom, and this neighbor attacked his 11-year-old sister. His mom yelled for him to run out of the house and run to the train station. So he took off. He's 8 years old. What is he going to do? Is he going to be a victim as well? Try to go and survive. Survive and tell your story. That's what survivors should do. They should tell their stories so people learn. And luckily he survived. So he managed to escape this murderer who wound up eventually killing his mom and his sister. His mom and his 11-year-old sister. But what he did was, this man was a notorious Ukrainian murderer. He killed over 60 of his Jewish neighbors around that time. But what was even worse is that he buried a lot of them alive. He beat them enough to where they were unconscious or couldn't defend themselves, and then he buried them. And I guess for weeks you would hear people crying from under the ground. Can you imagine just the sorrow of what was going on, and the sound and the hate in this man's heart to do something like this? So when our family friend was telling us the story, I'm getting goosebumps just remembering him telling the story because it was so emotional. This man survived. He was 8 years old. He got to the train station and just obviously people helping people, and he wound up surviving. But his sister and his mom didn't. And I can't even imagine how and what they went through. But I'm glad that he survived. I'm glad he shared the story with us, because then I could share the story with my friends. And I did. I've shared the story with so many of my friends. That's survival. And that are the things that, when I say I love to talk to older people, is why. Because you learn from them. You learn from their history. You learn from their mistakes. You learn from their experiences. You learn from their sadness. You learn from their survival. You learn from their not only their just a survival, but their wonderful years and what they accomplished in life and what they've seen in life. These things are so important, and to learn from them. I mean, with everything that's going on right now, from this virus to what's happening right now in this country, maybe this is like a lesson that needs to be taught. It's horrible what's happening to the businesses and people and everything else. But just maybe this is what needed to be done in a really horrific way. Because the reason it's happening is because there have been horrors that have been put on groups of people for God knows how long. And now that horror is back the other direction, and people are freaking out. So think about this. Like, if you're white and you're freaked out at home because of your business, I guess you kind of know what black people feel every time they leave their house, right? When they're driving down the street and they see a police officer, they think twice. You see a lot of shows and people talking about that black people have to have a talk with their kids at some point about how to act when they get pulled over, or if a police officer approaches them. That shouldn't be an issue. That should never be an issue. It's not in the United States of America. And for people to say, like, well, black people are criminals. No. Black people are criminals. White people are criminals. People are criminals because sometimes they have to be. Sometimes you don't have any other resources. You have to do what you have to do. Poor people are. And majority of black people come from poverty. I can't get it out. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, it's been a long couple of days. Black people come from impoverished situations. So yeah, if you live in a certain parts of town, violence or crime will come your way, and that's just systematic racism for years. You hold people down, and then what happens? This is what happens. So now cops stereotype. It's the same thing goes with with stereotyping Middle Eastern people. They're not all terrorists, but now at the airport you're like, oh my God, there's a Middle Eastern person. Oh my God, there's a Muslim person. So what? But that's the same type of mentality. Oh my God, it's a black person. They're a criminal. I got to pull them over. I've been pulled over dozens of times because my truck has chrome rims and black windows. I got pulled over last week, actually. And I have nothing to hide. And I'm not worried I'm going to be racially profiled. So I never I get nervous because I don't want to get a ticket. But I'm not going to get nervous they're going to find something in my truck. I'm not going to get nervous because they're going to think anything else because I'm just white. Just white. You could just be white and be okay. But if you're black, you're not just black. All of a sudden, in some people's eyes, is he a criminal? Is he a drug dealer? Is he this or that? That's the difference. And I think these riots are atrocious. And anybody who's looting and rioting, I have no sympathy for whatever comes their way through either those owners of those businesses taking care of business or them getting arrested. But with something like this and revolt like this, with fear, you learn with fear. How do you learn not to touch fire? You get burnt. When you're a kid, you touch fire, you get burnt, you never do it again. How do you know not to touch that dog that's barking at you? Because it nips at you. This is the same thing. Maybe this, in the most atrocious way, this needs to happen. And it's happening. And God forbid this cop and those cops that hopefully are going to get indicted with this cop all get what's coming their way. God forbid they don't. Can you imagine how crazy it is now and how people are angry now if this cop or those cops get acquitted? At that point, it's time to leave the country, or this planet is in deep, deep trouble besides this virus. So I wanted to share my feelings, if anybody even cares, but I wanted to share some of the stories of being a Russian Jew coming to this country and what we suffered and what we went through. Just so you get an idea that when immigrants come to this country, they go through a lot to get here. They struggle. They go in this very blindly, but so brave to leave a country, to come to a country without a job, in just hopes, to this wonderful country, United States of America, and to see that this country, who opens its arms, or for the longest time has opened its arms to everybody, closes its arms for certain groups that are citizens of this country. That's the part that's sad. Look at the homeless problem. The homeless problem is out of control in this country. These are Americans living on the street. So this is a horrendous thing, and it's scary. It is scary, especially today. The protests are fine. People walking by the house, totally cool. But what happens at night? That's the problem. That's the scary thing. It's nighttime. You're going to sleep. You don't know when you're going to wake up and what's going to happen. Are you going to be woken up in the middle of the night? Or are you going to wake up in the morning and your town's in shambles? But there it goes again, right? You're thinking of yourself, and you should, and of your own safety and mortality. And now think about going through that every day. Whether you're black in this country, or you're living, let's say, in the Middle East with all the things that happen there, or you're living in certain parts of Africa, or whichever country that has this happen on a daily basis. I people laugh at me because I watch the show 90 Day Fiancé. But what, to me, the most impactful part of that show is, and it's a dumb show, is Americans going to other countries. And a lot of it's Americans going to like Philippines or Nigeria, and they're shocked. Oh my God, you don't have running water? Oh my God, you have no power? What? There's no toilet? Yeah, welcome to the rest of the world. Welcome to the rest of the world. Not rest, but a lot of parts of the world. And then you wonder why people are trying to come to this country. It's and the people on the show, the Americans, are just like so judgmental of people's cultures, just don't get it. They don't get it because they've lived cushy lives. Even like the poorest of this country live cushy lives compared to a lot of the world. And that's what's forgotten. That's why I watch that show. I watch it because a lot of those couples are train wrecks, but the best part is watching Americans go to a different country, not knowing the culture, not even doing any research on the culture, and just going there blindly and being completely disrespectful in the way they judge it. It's not like in Nigeria, you could go to 7-Eleven and get whatever you need across the street, like you can't here. But also, with this country having all these resources, to not have resources to help the homeless problem or impoverished families and communities. What was that that I hear? That Michael Bloomberg spent $560 million to run for president, which he was not even going to win. So he just took $560 million and threw it out the window, right? Because he's got a stick up his ass against Donald Trump. So $560 million he spent out of his own pocket. Can you imagine if he reinvested that into the citizens, into poor communities, into poor people's bank accounts? Imagine if you just said, I'm just going to take $600 million and I'm going to donate $10,000 to, I don't know, every family that's that's below poverty lines. Imagine how many lives he would have changed instead of letting his ego try to make him president. Because as you know, anybody who's got a brain knows that politics is not about giving a fuck. Politics is literally about power. That's all it is. I mean, do you think Donald Trump gives a shit? No, he doesn't. His speeches prove it. Think Joe Biden gives a shit? He doesn't. It's all ego. The Clintons? No, thanks. I think Barack Obama was the only one that actually gave a shit. That's my opinion. But that's just the unfortunate part is that there are people here in this country, no matter if they're Democrat or Republican, they don't give a fuck. I mean, I just saw some video of a politician, then didn't realize the camera was rolling. He said the reason I'm only out here for the protest is because it's primary season. That's it, literally. He didn't know the camera was rolling. Democrats as bad as Republicans. You know why? Old white man. There's a video of Joe Biden using the N-word in the 80s. And now he's saying if you're black and you vote for Trump, you're not black. So now another old white man is telling black people how to vote. There it is. That's what it is. That's all it comes down to. Another white old man telling black people how to think. But he's hiding it behind his Democratic Party. And then you have Donald Trump who just says, we're just going to shoot civilians. Seriously. And these are the two politicians running to run our country for 4 more years. Sad. But hopefully, with all this going on, people will unite. People are uniting. People are not attacking each other on the streets. They're attacking stores. For most part, they're protesting very peacefully and how it should be. Because protesters are not there looting. Those are whole different types of people. And then you could also look at some certain groups that are, inciting all this with setting up bricks and all kinds of other weapons for these criminals at night to use. But that's it. I just wanted to share some of my views and some of my stories about being a Russian Jew. Not Ukrainian Jew, Russian Jew. Some of my Russian friends think it's funny to call me Ukrainian, and I just got all irritated over it. I'll tell you one quick. My last time dealing with a Ukrainian person that was, in my opinion, like a stereotypical Ukrainian person. I went to Vancouver, Canada, a few years ago to visit friends to go see a Canadian Football League game. Yes, I actually went to Canada to go see a Canadian Football League game. I worked really hard, and that was like my trip to treat myself. So we wound up going to this houseboat party. I didn't even know what a houseboat was until I got there, and it's thousands upon thousands boats with a house built on them, on docks. And this guy comes in who's a neighbor, and I guess the people who own the boat really didn't like him, but he always comes over when he hears music playing, so he thinks there's a party. He finds out I was Jewish, and he proceeds for the rest of the night to make Jew jokes, snide Jew jokes towards me. He knew I was Jewish. I knew he was Ukrainian, and he proceeded to just bash my religion. I'm not even religious. I don't have the Jewish holidays, but I am proud of who I am because of my parents. So what am I going to do? I just grinned it, and I just tried to come back a little bit at him, but I left it alone because that's not going to solve. He's trying to start a fight. He's trying to take his hate and put it on me, and I'm like, I'm not going to play up to his hate. The people that owned the boat, they eventually asked him to leave because they saw what was happening. But you see, this is what goes on a small scale for me, because he would have never known to pick on me if I didn't tell him I was Russian, and he asked me, "Are you a Jew?" That was exactly what he asked me. "Are you a Jew?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." And that's when it all started. Now think about this. If I said no to keep the peace, none of this would have happened. But if you're a different race, and he's coming on the boat, and he already has an issue with your race, your color, your creed, your sexual preference, and he can tell on you what you are so he could target you, and then a group of people like that, or someone in law enforcement sees that's got that same mindset, what do you do? What do you do? And I think all this is the reason for what's been going on for way too long, and people are fed up. I just wish it was done the way it's been done during the day and not the way it's done at night. And hence the curfew. People are pissed off over curfew, but curfew means if you're a law-abiding protester, you go home. If you're a criminal, you stay out because you want to loot. So there you go. This is how they're targeted. So if you have an issue with curfew, I guess go fuck yourself. What do you have to do out there anyways? We have a fucking virus still that I went and got tested for, and they stuck the swab up to my brain. There's no reason to be out anyways. So go stay home, watch TV, watch the news if you'd like, lock your doors, and hope to wake up in the morning, with a town that's still intact. But yeah, I hear a lot of chanting going on out there, which is fantastic. It sounds healthy. It doesn't sound violent. But anyways, that's it. Those are a few of my stories I wanted to share and my opinions on the matter. And let's hope that the message of Black Lives Matter just overpowers the other groups that are trying to sabotage this protest that's been needed for way too long. And now it's happening, and hopefully there's some change to be done. I appreciate you listening, and if you agree with me, thank you. If you don't, well, we all have our opinions, and we all have our thought process, and hopefully whatever your opinion is on the matter, you step back and just look at the bigger picture and see why people are enraged and they're so angry. Because they weren't angry before. They were angry, but they weren't like this. People weren't like this until this whole thing happened with the cop, even down to what's been happening the last month or so. And this was just a straw that broke the camel's back. And it's been breaking the country for a long time, and not completely broke the country. Let's hope our, president has a heart enough to come out and talk like a human being to human beings. Just sad, angry human beings are out there. He shouldn't even acknowledge the shitty people out there destroying property, hurting other people. Acknowledge the good people. That's how it should be done. Acknowledge the good people. Thank the good people. Don't attack the shitty people, because what happens then, you're inciting more, and you're playing up to what they want you to play up to. That's the whole point. That's why they do it. That's why groups like Antifa and groups like that, they are looking for a reaction. That's their whole point. And who plays up to it? Our president. Because he just can't get it. That's what happens when you're privileged your whole life. You just don't get it, unfortunately. During the protests, you hear different chants, and one of them is "No justice, no peace." And I remember that was the saying in '92 LA riots. I'm not sure if that saying was created before or that was something for the LA riots specifically, but there were people on the street selling shirts that said "No justice, no peace." I actually wound up picking one of these shirts up, and I would wear it. I would wear it proudly. Because back then, this was what, '92. I was 22 years old. I was going to my second college at the time, and I was very much into social justice and inequality. So I would wear the shirt proudly. Except one night, I was at 7-Eleven. It was in Sherman Oaks on Ventura Boulevard. I walk in there. It was like, I don't know, 11, 12 at night, and there were 3 police officers in there, and I'm wearing the shirt. And all I'm thinking is, oh my Lord, what's going to happen? I got dirty looks, but they didn't do anything. They just let me do my thing, buy my Slurpee, and head out the door. But around that time, I was very much into the social situations in the world, and especially in this country. And being a lot older now, I'm 50 now, and I was 22 at the time, 21, 22, 23. It was very impactful to me, very emotional. I went to school in inner city, so most of my friends were all different races, color, religion. So I've seen my friends get pulled over, questioned, things like that. So I believed in doing the right thing and treating everybody equally. When I was going to my second college, I was a junior college, LA Valley College. I wanted to learn more about different cultures. So I took African American Studies course. Now the interesting thing about that is that I was so into studying. I had the highest grade in class, 110%. I did all the extra work. I just loved it. I ate it all up. It was so informative. There was so much education that was given to us, and from the movies we watched, from the books we read, from experiences guests shared with us. The thing was that the next 2 highest grades in the class were this old white couple. So, the top grade in the class was this Russian Jew, and the next 2 were like this old white couple. And I think what it was that we really, really wanted to learn about the African American culture and the struggles. And so we know more. So we're more well-rounded people and more understanding people. And looking back on that and seeing young people, white people out there protesting hand in hand or even shielding black protesters, that would have been me. That was me in some ways. We didn't have protests back then. It was just a riot and then it was over. But that was me back then, and it's amazing to see how many people are putting aside whatever they're doing to go to make a point, to take a stand. And I think it's just part of being young and growing up in a multicultural city or town or families. So you learn and you appreciate and you sympathize. So with something like this, it's going to bring people together. Even though there's so much violence, it's going to bring people together. I was once told, when you're young, you think with your heart. When you're old, you think with your brain. Yeah, and sometimes when you think with your brain, it's fantastic. But if you've never thought with your heart at first, you've always thought with just your brain, then you don't understand. As a young person, you have to think with your heart because you're young, you're impressionable, you're still learning. When you're old, you have life experiences and you think with your brain, you evaluate certain things, the pros and cons, which you should because you're older. When you're younger, you wear your emotion on your sleeve, and you're seeing that right now. I love that. How did I just to see so, like when you go on social media, you see a lot of people posting videos being out there in the protest together. I hope they're doing it for the right reason, not for social media clout, but they're doing it because they generally care about the cause. There's a lot of people who are just doing it for social media clout. That's the problem with social media. But at least you're being informed of what's going on the street, and you're also getting to see who's actually doing what, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. There are good guys on both sides. They're great cops. They're great people that are protesting. Then you got shitty cops, and you got fucking horrendous people trying to take advantage of the situation to push their agenda ahead and hurt others. But for most part, people mean well, and sometimes when I get angry and I see what's going on, I have to remember that when I was 22, I wore that "No Justice, No Peace" shirt with so much pride and anger, for what happened. So I understand in many ways. I really do. I might have to break out that shirt. Actually, that shirt, I cut out that sign, and I wore it to an AVN Awards. It's on the back of my jacket. It says "No Justice, No Peace" on the back of my jacket. And might have to, take that thing out of the closet and wear it again. But it's true. No justice, no peace. And this is what's happening right now. There's no justice, so there's not going to be any peace until there is justice. Rightfully so.